Hey, my name's Naomi. Let me walk you through my little world, just so you know who you're dealing with here. I grew up with just my mom, Sarah. She was a nurse, always running off her feet to make ends meet, but somehow, she managed. We never had much, but she busted her ass to make sure I never felt it. Every evening, when she'd slump down at our kitchen table, I'd hear bits and pieces about her day, how she helped an old man walk again or comforted someone who had nobody else. It got me thinking, early on, that I wanted to be in the helping business too, just with less blood, so biology was it for me. As for my dad? Never knew him. He was out of the picture before I could even crawl, and Mom never talked much about him, except to say it was just us, and that was enough. And honestly, it was. School was my thing, especially science. I ate up anything to do with cells and genes, anything that explained a little bit of why we're here and how we tick. Made sense to me to go in that direction career-wise, so I ended up at a pharmaceutical company after college, messing around with compounds and hopefully making something useful. It wasn't all work, though. I had my share of fun, too. My best friend, Jess, made sure of that. She dragged me out to all the parties she could, saying I needed to lighten up. That's where I met Alex. Come on, Naomi, you're gonna love this guy. Jess nudged me one night at one of her famous backyard bashes. She had this grin on her face, the kind that told me she was up to no good. Jess, I'm not. Just talk to him. His name's Alex. Cute, funny, and as nerdy about music as you are about your science stuff. She pushed, practically shoving a drink into my hand. I remember rolling my eyes, but let's be real, I was curious. So, I let her lead me through the crowd, past the makeshift dance floor where a couple of guys were trying way too hard, to where Alex was standing, awkwardly holding a beer and looking like he wanted to be anywhere but at a party. Hey, Alex, this is Naomi. Jess introduced us with a little too much enthusiasm. Naomi, meet Alex, the only other person I can tolerate for more than an hour. We talked about everything that night, from the latest rock albums to the weirdest science facts. Turned out, he was into biology too, but more the corporate side of things. His dad ran a toilet paper company, which cracked me up. A toilet paper tycoon, huh? I teased. Hey, everybody needs it. Alex shot back, laughing. What about you? Saving the world one petri dish at a time? Something like that. I grinned. We clicked, simple as that. A year flew by with Alex. Movies, late-night talks, dinners with Jess poking fun at us for being disgustingly cute. Everything was pretty perfect, till he wanted me to meet his folks. I was game but nervous as hell about it. His dad was this big-shot business owner, and his mom stayed at home, keeping their life in order. We met at some swanky restaurant downtown that had more forks at each setting than I had drawers in my kitchen. Alex held my hand under the table, giving it a reassuring squeeze as we waited for his parents to show up. They're usually right on time, Alex muttered, checking his watch for the umpteenth time. Just as he said it, a man with a commanding air and a woman with a carefully styled bob walked in. George and Linda, the people who could potentially be my future in-laws. Mom, Dad, this is Naomi. Alex introduced me with a proud smile. Linda offered a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes as she took me in, from my hair down to my shoes. George, however, gave a warm handshake, his grin genuine. Nice to meet you, Naomi. Alex has told us a lot about you, George said, settling down beside his wife. The dinner started off well enough. We talked about mundane things, weather, the restaurant's decor, and a bit about George's toilet paper empire, which he discussed with a sort of bemused pride. Then Linda, swirling her wine glass, leaned in with a smile that felt more like a shark sizing up its next meal. So, Naomi, Alex tells us you're a biologist. That must be interesting. Yeah, it's pretty fascinating work. Getting to see the building blocks of life, helping develop new medicines, I replied, trying to sound both enthusiastic and humble. And your parents must be proud. What does your father do? Linda asked, the question dropped like a casual afterthought. The table seemed to go a bit quieter. Alex's grip on my hand tightened. I hesitated, the weight of her question sinking in. I wouldn't know, actually. My dad left before I was born. It's just been me and my mom, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the churn in my gut. Linda's eyebrows shot up, her smile faltering. Oh, I see. That's rather unfortunate. It's hard to know what you're getting with uncertain lineage. Not knowing if there's a history of, well, undesirable traits. My mouth felt dry. I glanced at Alex, whose jaw had tightened. I think people are more than their genetics, I managed to say. Of course, but you know, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, Linda continued, her tone light but her words heavy. For all we know, he could have been a drunk or worse. And being raised by a single mother, well, it's not the ideal situation for stability, is it? George seemed uncomfortable, shifting in his seat as he tried to change the subject. Linda, why don't we? No, George, these are legitimate concerns. We're thinking about the future of our family here. Linda cut in, her gaze fixed on me like I was a problem to solve. Alex finally spoke up, his voice firm. Mom, Naomi is amazing. She's smart, kind, and the hardest worker I know. Whatever her dad was or wasn't doesn't change who she is. The rest of the meal passed in a blur of tension. I pushed food around my plate, feeling like I'd been put on trial and found wanting. When we finally left the restaurant, the relief was palpable. A whole year of mostly bliss and a little bit of family drama flew by, and there we were, sitting at my mom's cozy kitchen table, talking wedding plans. Mom was all smiles and tears, thrilled to bits about the big day. Naomi, this is going to be beautiful. I'm so proud of you, she kept saying, squeezing my hand. Just as we were picking colors and themes, Alex's phone buzzed. His face fell as soon as he saw who it was. It's my mom, he said, excusing himself to take the call in the next room. The change in his tone had my stomach tightening with nerves. I exchanged a worried look with Mom, who mouthed, "Everything okay?" Moments later, Alex came back, looking like he'd seen a ghost. My dad had an accident. He's in the hospital. We need to go, now. He rushed out the words. We grabbed our things and sped to the hospital. The drive felt like the longest of my life, each second stretching out as I imagined the worst. When we arrived, Linda was pacing the waiting area, a mess of worry. He just lost consciousness while driving. Thank God someone saw and called it in, she said, her voice cracking. He was supposed to be at a meeting. Now they're saying it's his lungs, they found a serious disease. My heart sank. What do they say needs to be done? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady for Alex's sake. He needs a part of a lung, a transplant. Linda choked out the words. They want to check if Alex could be a donor. Without hesitation, Alex spoke up. Let's do whatever tests are needed. I'm here, I'm ready. They took him away to run the preliminary tests, and Linda and I sat in an uneasy silence. The hospital's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows. Finally, Alex returned, holding a sheet of paper in his hand, his brow furrowed. They've done the blood tests and stuff. Look, Naomi, this is odd, he said, handing me the results. I glanced at the paper and my eyes widened. Blood type AB. I remembered the conversation about blood types we had once, idly chatting. Alex, didn't you tell me both your parents are type A? Yeah, they are. Why? He looked puzzled. If both your parents are type A, you can't be AB. I explained slowly, the scientist in me kicking in despite the personal chaos. It's just not genetically possible. Alex's face went pale. What does that mean? I took a deep breath, not wanting to unravel this here. Let's just keep this info for now, I said, taking out my phone and snapping a photo of the results. Might need to think this through later. He nodded, confusion written all over him, but we were quickly pulled back into the current crisis as a doctor approached us. Your fiancé isn't a match, unfortunately. but we're arranging for another potential donor now. The surgery is urgent, the doctor explained briskly. We spent the next hours waiting, caught in a haze of medical updates and silent personal questions. Despite everything, my mind kept circling back to the blood type issue, but I pushed it away, focusing on being there for Alex and hoping for his dad's recovery. After the successful surgery and Alex's dad's swift recovery, we didn't want to put our lives on hold any longer. So, we decided to go ahead with our engagement party. It was supposed to be a celebration, a new beginning, but as it turned out, not everyone was on the same page. We picked this lovely restaurant overlooking the river, thinking it'd be perfect for a night of joy. I was buzzing around, making sure everything was just right, but my nerves were shot. My mom was running late because of a last-minute emergency at her clinic, which I knew was going to kick off some snide remarks. Sure enough, as the guests started filling in, Linda took her chance the moment she arrived. Dressed to the nines, she swept in with a frosty air that could chill champagne. Starting without the mother of the bride, are we? Linda said loudly, making sure her voice carried over to where I was checking on the seating arrangement. Well, I suppose punctuality isn't valued in some families. Naomi, dear, it's such a shame your mother's habits reflect so poorly on you. I clenched my jaw, forcing a smile. She got caught up at work, Linda. You know, saving lives. She'll be here any minute, I replied, keeping my tone light despite the heat rising in my cheeks. Linda tooted, shaking her head as she glanced around, pulling some of our relatives closer. It's always something, isn't it? An engagement dinner is a significant event, yet it seems some people don't treat it with the respect it deserves. It's just such behavior that makes one question the upbringing, doesn't it? I took a deep breath, reminding myself that this night wasn't about Linda or her approval. Everyone who knows us understands and respects why she might be late. It's really not a problem for anyone here, I countered, my voice steady but firm. Oh, but it is, Naomi. When you marry into a family, you bring your background with you. And let's be honest, dear, your background is a bit muddled, isn't it? Linda continued, her voice dripping with disdain. A daughter born out of wedlock, to a woman who couldn't even manage to catch a husband. The murmurs around us grew, and I saw Alex's face darken from across the room. He started to make his way over, but I raised my hand slightly, signaling him to let me handle it. Linda, my mother has done a remarkable job raising me on her own. She's shown me the value of hard work and integrity, something we all appreciate here, I said, my voice louder now, making sure it carried the weight of my conviction. And Alex and I are committed to each other, regardless of what anyone else thinks or says. The atmosphere was thick with tension, but I didn't want the evening to spiral into conflict. I took a deep breath, glancing around at the gathered friends and family who were here to celebrate with us. Let's not let this delay us any further, I suggested, my voice calm but carrying. Please, everyone, let's sit down and enjoy the evening. We're here to celebrate our engagement, something happy and full of hope. The engagement dinner was in full swing, despite the rocky start. Everyone seemed to be enjoying themselves, laughing and chatting over plates of delicious food. I was making my rounds, ensuring all our guests felt welcomed, when the front door of the restaurant swung open. My heart leapt. It was Mom, finally here, looking a bit flustered but as beautiful as ever in her elegant dress. Sorry I'm so late, everyone, she called out, making her way through the crowd to where we were gathered around a table with Alex's parents. I figured it was as good a time as any to formally introduce her to Alex's folks. Mom, this is George and Linda, Alex's parents, I said, gesturing towards them with a smile. But as soon as my mom laid eyes on George, her whole demeanor changed. She let out a sharp gasp, covered her eyes with her hands, and staggered back a step. It was like she'd seen a ghost. Mom? What's wrong? I rushed to her side, completely bewildered. She was pale, shaking her head as if to dispel a nightmare. George, too, looked like he'd been struck, his face draining of color, his eyes fixed on the floor. This can't be happening, my mom murmured, her voice barely audible. We can't, this wedding can't go on. Confused and starting to panic, I pressed. Mom, what are you talking about? What's going on? She finally looked up, her eyes filled with tears. Naomi, this is too much. George is your father. We can't do this. The room fell silent instantly, the earlier noise dying down as if sucked away. Murmurs began to ripple through the crowd, everyone trying to grasp what they had just heard. Linda, who had been sitting quietly, suddenly stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. George, what is she talking about? What is this nonsense? George couldn't meet her eyes. He just stared at the ground, his voice a tortured whisper. It's true, Linda. I was with Sarah before you. When she told me she was pregnant, I wasn't ready. I left her. I never knew. I never thought. Alex, who had been standing by my side, looked like he was going to crumble right there. Dad? You mean? Naomi and I are. He couldn't even finish the sentence, his face crumpling in despair. I felt numb, the shock too big to process. My fiancé, the man I loved, was my half-brother. It was like a twisted nightmare, except I was wide awake. Can't be together? Alex managed to choke out, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. I didn't know what to say, what to feel. Everything was collapsing around us. Our future, our plans, the life we'd imagined together, all tainted by a secret that should have come out decades ago. After the bombshell about my dad, the room felt like a pressure cooker about to blow. Confusion and shock were written on everyone's faces. That's when I remembered something crucial, those blood test results from before Alex's dad's surgery. I needed to make sense of everything, not just for me, but for everyone caught in this mess. Can everyone just stop for a moment? My voice cut through the murmurs, louder than I expected. All eyes turned to me. Linda, I said, looking directly at Alex's mom. I have to ask, why do you and Alex have different blood types? What's going on there? Linda's face went pale, her eyes darting around, looking for an out. She opened her mouth, then closed it, the words failing her as her husband turned to her, his expression hardening. Tell me the truth, Linda. Now. George's voice boomed across the room, his patience worn thin. She stumbled over her words, trying to grasp at any explanation that could save face. It's a misunderstanding, that's all. Naomi is trying to make a scandal where there isn't one. But just as she tried to deflect, her sister, who'd been silent until now, stood up. Her face was set, resolved, like she'd been carrying a heavy burden for far too long. No, Linda. I can't do this anymore. I won't cover for you, she said, her voice steady and carrying across the room. Linda was already pregnant when she married George. He isn't Alex's father. She lied to keep her secret. The room erupted into gasps and whispers, the guests turning to one another, their expressions a mix of disbelief and dismay. Linda tried to speak, tried to salvage her crumbling facade, but the truth was out, and it hit harder than anything else she could say. Is this true? George's voice cracked, the pain evident. Linda's silence was answer enough. Alex looked from his mother to his uncle, then back to me. The hurt in his eyes was almost too much to bear. Mom, how could you? His voice was a whisper, a plea for something, anything that might make sense of the chaos. Linda's facade finally crumbled, her defense weak and feeble. I thought it was best at the time. To protect everyone, she murmured, but her words fell flat, lost in the shock of her deceit. The room was thick with tension, everyone processing the revelations that had turned the night upside down. No one seemed to take Linda's side, the sympathy was with me, my mom, and strangely enough, with George, who'd been lied to just as much as anyone. As the evening wound down, the guests slowly began to leave, their whispers and looks of sympathy trailing behind them. Alex stayed by my side, his earlier joy replaced by a somber quiet. We'll figure this out, Naomi, he said finally, squeezing my hand. we're not alone in this. We have each other. Yeah, I managed to say, the weight of his words, both a comfort and a reminder of the complicated path ahead. Together, whatever that means now. The days following the engagement dinner felt like walking through a fog. Alex and I had decided to take some time to ourselves, to process everything. We weren't breaking up, but we couldn't pretend our relationship could go on the same either. It was one of those tough decisions that neither of us wanted but both knew was necessary. A week later, I met up with my mom and George at a quiet coffee shop. It was the first time we were talking since the big revelation. The air was thick with awkwardness as we sat down. George looked older, the lines on his face deeper, weighed down by guilt. "I'm sorry, Naomi. I can't say it enough. If I'd just faced up to what I did back then." George's voice trailed off, his eyes not meeting mine. "Yeah, well, you didn't. And here we are," I replied, not ready to offer forgiveness yet. "You missed my whole life, and now things are a mess." "I know, and I'm here to make whatever amends I can," George said earnestly. "I've missed so much, and I regret that deeply. I want to be part of your life now, if you'll let me." I looked at my mom, who had been quietly sipping her coffee. "Mom, what do you think? Can we even start to fix this?" She set her cup down, her voice steady. "I've had a lot of years to think about what happened. I was angry, so angry at George, for a long time. But holding on to that hasn't helped me, or you. If George is sincere, and I believe he is, maybe it's time we tried to move forward." Moving forward sounded good in theory, but it was hard to know where to start. "Okay, let's say we try this. What does moving forward even look like?" I asked, genuinely unsure. George leaned forward, his expression serious. "For starters, I want to be there for you, however you need. And not just with words. Financially, emotionally, whatever gaps I can fill." It felt weird, considering letting George in after everything. But Mom seemed to think it was worth trying, and I trusted her more than anyone. "And what about Linda and Alex?" I had to ask, the question hanging over us. George's face clouded over. "Linda and I are figuring things out. As for Alex, he's heartbroken, Naomi. He loves you. He wants to stay in your life, if you'll have him." My heart ached at the mention of Alex. I don't know how to be around him and not feel everything I felt before. But I don't want to lose him either. "It's going to take some time." "Take all the time you need," George assured. "We'll go at whatever pace you set." After everything that happened, the dust finally settled, and the biggest surprise was that Alex and I found our way back to each other. Despite the unbelievable twists our lives had taken, our love proved resilient. We realized that no matter what, we couldn't imagine our lives apart. Eventually, we celebrated our wedding, surrounded by those who supported us through thick and thin, and it was genuinely the happiest day of my life. Life went on, and as for Alex's parents, they ended up divorcing. George, feeling betrayed by years of deception, left Linda without alimony or a share in the joint property. He was hurt deeply but decided to channel his efforts into something positive by transferring all his property and business to Alex and me. Running the business has been a challenge, but Alex handles it like he was born for it, and I've never been prouder of him. Things between George and my mom, Sarah, are still tense. Mom never fully forgave him for leaving her all those years ago, and their interactions are mostly cordial and only for the sake of family harmony. It's not perfect, but they manage for our sakes. As for Linda, after the divorce, she moved to another city. We don't hear much from her, and she wasn't invited to the wedding. Honestly, neither Alex nor I want to rekindle that connection. It's better for everyone this way. Sitting in our backyard, Alex and I often talk about how our journey together has been anything but ordinary. Remember when we thought planning a wedding was going to be our biggest challenge? I joked one evening, sipping on my tea as the sun set beautifully in front of us. Alex laughed, wrapping an arm around me. "Yeah, life threw us some curveballs, didn't it? But look at us now. Yeah, stronger than ever, I agreed, leaning into him. I wouldn't change a thing about our story. We've come to understand that life doesn't have to be perfect to be wonderful. We've faced challenges that would have broken many, but here we are, living proof that what doesn't kill you really does make you stronger. Our story isn't just about the struggles, but also about overcoming them, about love finding a way, and about building a future together no matter what.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked. We could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was. As the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1, if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.